longer than you expected. Okay, next up we've got David Ward here. David is, let me just get this straight, the Director Advisory at Ash Street, a boutique professional services firm providing integrated multidisciplinary advice to solve complex business problems using high capability talent and an agile commercial model. David has considerable expertise of working with executive teams on the development and successful execution of sustainable business strategies, tier 1 banking, and consulting trained in business transformation. He combines classical techniques with the latest research in human behavior and the neuroscience of change. David has an MBA from Melbourne Business School, an honors graduate degree in mathematics and computer science, and tertiary qualifications in change management from Georgetown University and Stanford Graduate School of Business. Could everyone please join me in welcoming David Ward?
So just while we're starting, getting the presentation up, good morning and thank you for the opportunity today. Who's been at their current company or organisation or institution for between 2 and 3 years or less? Yeah, anyone less than 3 years? Okay, that's pretty good. Anyone speak Russian? Yeah. Okay, good. Okay, so we're off to a good start. So I'm going to talk about the neuroscience of innovation. It's relevant because I reckon most of you feel like you're innovative and you do innovative things, and some of you probably do. Some of you want to be innovative and are not innovative. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what innovation is, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what's going on in the brain. So human psychology is about 4,000 years old, which is the science of observing human behaviour. And then since 1991, we've been able to see the brain in action using functional MRI scanning. So now we can actually understand what's happening in the brain from a physical, wiring, chemical and electrical process. And that interests me a lot more. And this presentation is all about that. Happy? Okay. So an innovation, well, let's do a definition. Innovation is a new thing or a new method of doing something. Or another definition is innovation is the introduction of new ideas, methods or things. And the thing that struck me when I first read the definition is all around newness. Is everyone comfortable with that?
Well, to know that is to make something new.
Okay, good. From Latin. Yeah, oh, very. Okay, so what I want to talk about today is not necessarily coming up with new data to put down a pathway of existing thinking. I want to talk about changing the way you think. Yeah, because that's important for innovation. So it's not about collecting data like today we're transmitting. We're going to talk a bit today, but we're transmitting. And then you're not going to think differently if I transmit. Yeah, because you'll basically use the same mental model to take the new data in, and you may, if you're lucky, do something faster. But I'm not necessarily going to rewire your brain today. Yeah, so I want to talk about rewiring the brain and pretty much how that happens. So we'll talk about the innovation radar. Some of you may have heard of this. I'll talk about the importance of failure. I'll talk about the neuroscience of innovation and what's going on in the brain. And I'll tell you, but pretty much once you learn all of that, how you can trick the brain and how global Fortune 500 companies are doing this and getting extraordinary results. So the innovation radar. So what is innovation? Anyone? Old things better. Yeah, that's a good one. I like that. Could you give an example of innovation? Just any example. Oh, that's innovative. What is it? Yeah. That's pretty cool. That's like Uber, isn't it? Yeah, a little clue. Any others? or the drone can go up and have a look. And, yeah, very good. Yeah, I like that. Okay, so these three things are different. So one's a product, one's a service, and the other one's a product. Yeah. And when I speak to most people in startup land, because I work with a lot of startups, most people concentrate on the product. And I work with a lot of VCs and capital houses, and a lot of people pitch a product. Yeah. But innovation is a lot bigger than that. So these are generally in the class of what we call offerings. And some researchers, and I met them at Kellogg, but I'm not sure they originally started at Kellogg, basically came up with 12 dimensions of innovation. And pretty much around what it is, which is what we're talking about now and most people talk about. Another one was about who it's directed towards. Another one is pretty much how it works. And then the final one was where it works. So they came up with this sort of wheel. It's called the innovation wheel. Radar, sorry. And pretty much you can measure on a scale of 0 to 7 different types of things. And if you overlay some innovations, we'll give some examples. So the one that's obvious is the iPhone, is a what? That's a product. I can sort of pick it up and touch it and feel it. And I feel that's innovative. The espresso is a solution. So it's not necessarily the pod or the fact that the machine can create high pressure to create a sort of crema effect on a cup of coffee. That's not the innovation. The innovation is in the end-to-end solution for the customer and controlling that end-to-end solution. And the other thing was around creating stratification in the brand. So people that know Nestle know that they basically went through an exercise of stratifying the brand in coffee, so from instant coffee to premium instant coffee, all the way up to sort of coffee, Australian-style high-quality coffee shops, and realised they had missing categories. So Nespresso was designed just to fill a category. Does anyone know when Nespresso was invented? Yeah, it was like late 70s, early 80s. And people thought it was a nonsense. And it was nonsense as it would never catch on. So it was reignited once this stratification work was done. And we had a mission strata. So Mercedes do this. So Mercedes look at different classes of car, four-wheel drive, mini-city cars, and basically they realised they were in missing categories, which is why every time I look at a road, I see a different type of Mercedes. I can't keep up with Mercedes now. They've got every class of car for every type of person. It's just ridiculous. But Mercedes Youth, that's coming out as well. Another one is Starbucks. So let's talk about Starbucks. So Starbucks wasn't around about coffee. Do you remember the famous phrase, what Starbucks is? What's the Starbucks innovation? Sorry? That's a good one, yeah. So has anyone heard of the third place? Okay, so when Starbucks was invented, one of the phrases they coined was the third place. So you had home to socialise, you had work to socialise, and Starbucks became the third place. So this is the third place to meet. And Starbucks is about the inexperience in the meeting place, so the experience in the meeting place. It's not about the coffee. Anyone that's Australian that's been to a coffee shop knows it's not about the coffee. Definitely not about coffee. And they tried to enter Australia, and apart from the tourist locations they've got, they couldn't cut it. So Starbucks is not about coffee or sandwiches or paninis. It's about creating that third meeting place, and they're pretty good at that. And sometimes they're too good at it. So you can go in with your Apple MacBook Pro in the morning, buy one coffee and stay all day with free Wi-Fi. And that's part of the downside of the coffee shop. But you can start measuring Starbucks on different dimensions. They're really good at the customer experience, really good at brand, and really good at presence. But what happens if I'm in charge of strategy at Starbucks? I might have to sort of look at a new dimension. So if I want to be really, really good in another area, I can make that part of my strategy. So if I'm really poor in supply chain, I can start some specific work to get better at supply chain. So this tool is moderately useful to understand where you're innovating. So the first lesson to learn is that innovation is more than a product. If that's comfortable for you, brilliant. If that's a new thing, then you need to think that through as well. So just like Legala just then, they talked about, I heard product, but then I heard different things. I heard the solution, I heard a little bit of value capture. So it's important to determine as a company or an academic, exactly what you're focusing on when you talk about innovation, because it's not as obvious as it seems. So fail to innovate. So how many people here fail catastrophically in their career?
How many times?
Yeah. So I like Pip already. Yeah. Anyone else? Anyone lost money, in a small business venture or some shares or? Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty painful, isn't it? But it's really, really useful. And I'll talk a little about failure now. And I'm going to put something to you that most people don't believe. You can't learn unless you fail. Okay? So the definition of learning is failure. Okay? And I'll try and demonstrate that now. So failure is a lack of success in doing or achieving something. I'm trying to find a definition for failure. They're all rubbish. If you say that someone has failed, you mean they have not succeeded in a particular activity. That's from the Collins English Dictionary, please. True, that is true. But as an individual, you can perceive failure.
Oh, you can perceive yourself as a failure. I looked out a report.
Yeah,
I looked out a report and thought, I'm a complete rubbish failure.
Yeah, and I'll explain context. Yeah.
Isn't this whole idea of getting away from it,
Yeah, no. So that is the common accepted practice, and that's something I'm trying to discourage you to do. Okay. So I don't want you to think of the world as this sort of beautiful place where failure is a mental model. Yeah, failure is a biological necessary event in order for you to survive and thrive in the world.
It's highly motivating.
Yeah. So this is the difference between psychology and neuroscience. Yeah. So we'll come on to this. Yeah. Because, and again, I'm not a psychiatrist, and I'm not trying to make you feel happy. I'm trying to make you feel productive. Yeah. So I don't care what people think how the world looks. I'm telling you how it looks. Yeah. Based on the neuroscience. So the thing that really struck me is failure is contextual to a goal. If you think about all types of failure, I was trying to achieve something, I didn't achieve it. So whether you've named the goal or whether it's inferred, there's a goal. Yeah. So let's just choose that as our accepted practice. Yeah. So failure is you try and do something, you don't achieve it. Sometimes it's really clear what you're trying to do. Sometimes it's really unclear, but you sort of had a rough idea. Like this session today. My goal today is to share something with you, and I want to try and change the way you think. And I might fail. Yeah? If I do, then I'll learn something, and I'll try a different way next time. So let's talk about that. So you have the goal, and you have some processing, and you may not be successful. That's pretty much the mental construct of the brain, yeah? So I'm trying to achieve something. To achieve something, I have to do something, some activity or thinking, but I may not be successful. Is that a reasonable logic flow? Yeah?
Is it your success or is somebody else's perspective of your success?
So your perspective of your success, yeah? So imagine you're the only person in the world for now, yeah? Just to help me fit through this. Yeah, because I'm not talking about shared brains or another person's brain, I'm talking about your brain. And neuroscience is about your brain for the time being. And when brains get together, there's a whole different conversation that happens, which is another speech. Anyway, if you're not successful, what do you do? Pip, I mean, you're in academia, what do you do?
Oh, you try it another way. Try it again, put it another way.
Yeah. And when anyone that has failed, what's the immediate reaction? Shit, yeah, good one, yeah. What about people that said, I haven't failed? What about that? Yeah, so I haven't failed. Or actually, I haven't failed, the data's wrong. Yeah? So there's sort of like there's two types, isn't there? So like denial or rationalization. And you see this in politicians. They deny Theresa May, she's sort of denying the data, and pushing on. So that's denial. So her mental, I believe she thinks she can get Brexit through. I believe that's what she thinks. I don't think she's pretending or gaming it. I think she believes that. Please.
Another example we talk about is uni students playing markets for grades.
Yeah.
The market stuffed up. Oh, they didn't read that properly.
Yeah.
The uni student themselves stuffed up.
Yeah. So there's a little bit of denial and a little bit of rationalization.
Then there's the Trump approach, which is you change, you reframe what you thought the goal was.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you can reframe and have a new goal.
You just go, well, no, what you thought was my goal was not
Yeah.
my goal. It was something else that I've achieved.
Yeah, and again, today we're only talking about rational brains. So brain injuries and dementia, we're not including that, okay? So anyway, you're not successful. Anyway, so we'll do it again. So if you're not successful again, in Legaler, and in your coding, and in your innovation, in your blockchain, what do you do next?
A new goal. A new goal.
You keep trying. You just, you're winners. Everyone can see it in your face, you're winners. So you keep going. Now you're nearly successful. So there's a little hint, so, this is going to work. Legal is finally going to get some funding, and they're going to take off, because all the ideas are fantastic, all the language is fantastic, they want this everywhere in the world, and you need $1 billion to do it. How close to $1 billion are you? 2 billion, okay. Yeah, please.
Yeah, I just wondering, what do you mean by not successful in blockchain? Do you mean the blockchain is not successful? Or
No.
you know what you mean?
Nothing to do with blockchain.
Okay.
Forget that. Yeah. This session's about blockchain, this speech is not about blockchain. But at the end, I'm going to link it back to blockchain. Yeah? So for now, just ignore blockchain. Just think about life. Yeah? Okay? So now you're nearly successful. And now you're successful. Hey, I've actually got real evidence this is working. Isn't that true? Sometimes it's working. And the client's buying it. Yeah? So what are you going to do now? Yeah, you're going to do the same thing again. Because then it gets more successful, and more successful, and more successful. And eventually, you get super success. And then you think, this is the winning model. This is the winning model. And therefore, that's my mental model. Yeah? I'm highly incentivized to repeat it. And this is how humans evolved. So when we had more simpler lives, this is, if you collect the berries and the guys go out and hunt the rabbits in the day, and that creates a sort of stable society, I'll just repeat it. There is no point in changing or travelling, we'll just repeat it. It's not essential to life. So there's a downside. So when you get these strong ways of thinking, so I'm just going to do it again. So UTS. So I'm working with UTS, I'm speaking to UTS about reinventing UTS. Yeah? Because UTS is one of many universities, and the university model is a little bit broken. Yeah? So the reason they get broken is the more success you get, the more you're incentivized to repeat the way of thinking, or the mental model. And the way the brain works is it lays down a thick neural coating on the synaptic connections, the axis. And basically these get thicker and thicker over time. And the reason it does that is to preserve fuel. So there is no point in spending energy thinking in a different way if I'm getting good outcomes. There's no point. So therefore it creates a thick neural highway. So it's a little bit like from here to get out to Pacific Highway, and then Pacific Highway to get on the M1, the freeway to go north to Newcastle and then to Brisbane. So these highways are pre-built, yeah? And when data comes in, you go down the highway. You can't get off the highway, you come down the highway. So when you try and think differently, you can't do that. Provided enough time has passed and enough success has happened. And these are very hard to break by will. So these neural connections are hard to break by will. And the reason they're hard-coded is it's essential to life. That's how humans and mammals evolved. So when it's essential to life, you repeat the actions. And you need to have these strong highways to create quick reactions. Because sometimes in life, you need a quick reaction to survive. And those people that don't have quick reactions have died out, they're finished now. And we're the result of the people that thought quickly and reacted quickly. So what happens in failure, and if the failure is meaningful and impactful, you get a physical breakage of this neural connection. So it takes a long time to encode and get thick, and it happens immediately. Yeah? It happens with a loss of a CEO, a catastrophic event, a death, a bereavement. You can get these neural breakages instantly, please.
Yeah, so once you fail or anything, you change your neural pathway, and you build a new neural pathway, correct?
You don't change it, so the old pathway breaks. No, it's not there. It's gone. This is really important, but it's probably to your question. Keep going.
So, but you build a new neural pathway, right? I mean, and generally, the idea that I understand is when you talk about it takes time. It takes about 9 days to develop a pathway, in which case that's about the time it would take to strengthen the neural pathway.
Yeah. So you bring. So that's the question, and the answer is here. So I'm going to come on to that. So if I don't answer it, we'll keep going. Yeah.
Okay.
So
So is it only one failure, or is it catastrophic
it
failure?
has to be an emotionally impactful failure, and I can construct these. So this event today could be emotionally impactful for me. And it could be a dissertation that gets pushed back in your final PhD delivery. So it's meaningful but not deadly. What your brain's trying to do is perceive its threat to life. And to threat to life, you have to care.
The road going north, there's a landslide and there's control of the road, you can't drive up that.
Yeah, so it's like that. The path doesn't exist. So basically the neural breakage happens. And this is different from computers. So a circuit board in a computer is hardwired along the main trunkway. So in the CPU and RAM, you've got transient memory and you've got processing power. But there's physical connections between diodes and parts of the circuit board. So in the computer analogy, it'd be like physically breaking a connection. Now when the connection's broken, it never comes back. You can't rewind. Okay? So it's broken forever. We've got MRI imaging of this happening, these strong neural connections breaking. We can interview people beforehand about the way they believe things. We have an intervention and this strong neural pathway breaks. And they'll swear blind they never thought like that. They'll tell me, I never thought like that before. I never believed it in that way. Even though we've got video evidence of them telling us that this connection's finished. But what happens? When you fail, we talked about it earlier, didn't we? You want to succeed again. So this strong connection's finished, now you want to build it back up again. So what happens is you try something new. And you fail and you try something new. And on the synapse, there's small connections that start feeding and growing out, and you get these young neural connections forming over the 90 days, the 1 day, the 90 days, all reinforced by sleep cycles. And sleep is important in this process. So after 90 days, the coating starts to go on again, and it becomes a main pathway, which is, this is the way I'm now going to do it. And over 2 or 3 years, it becomes a highway again. So when I go to very large corporations, the CBAs, the Telstras of the world, then I can't help them. There's nothing I can do at Telstra to help them think different. I can have transformation programs. I can have $100 million consultants in there doing all the processes. I can put values on a poster. Nothing will make a difference. It's too late for me. Okay? So one of the key insights from the research, it's not my research, this is the National Science Foundation of the US, working with the US military and a team of PhD cog-science. Basically, you cannot think differently by will. Failure triggers a physical break in your mental model, and a new mental model forms over time, which allows you to think differently. And thinking differently allows you to innovate. Okay? Anyone got any questions before I go on to the next one? Okay, so lesson 2, you have to fail to innovate. So failure is sometimes, I've still got one child in school, and this is positive sort of reinforcement of behaviour. Actually, if you want children to learn, you want them to fail. It's really important. And it's not from a psychology point of view, or wellness point of view, it's from a learning point of view, survival point of view. And to create resilience in children, it's important to fail. So let's talk a bit about what goes on in the brain. So 4 parts of the brain. I'm creating analogies to computers, because I've got a background in computers, and some of you may have as well. And some of you have them overlap. So you've got a CPU, which is the sort of top bit, and the CPU in the brain is pretty much your cortex and prefrontal cortex. No other mammal has a prefrontal cortex, we're the only ones, and it allows us to conceptualize and envision a future state. You have a fuel source, which is like a battery, survival focus, and you have memories. Everyone comfortable with that? I know it's really simple. I try and simplify the brain, that's a hard thing to do. I'll probably be here in 5 years' time and we learn a whole lot more and this all seems ridiculous. Okay, now in my language, for neuroscience language, the CPU is like dominant mental models. Yeah, so I said that right at the beginning. I get new data, but I'm shoving it down the same highway because I've got a dominant mental model. So if you want to be innovative, you have to change the CPU. You have to break the way you think, then put data down there. And we do a lot of interpolation and pattern matching, and I'll prove that in a minute. We have a survival mechanism, which exists every day. So in this room now, there's a bit of survival mechanism. So I'll say things that annoy you, make you a little warm, make you want to leave the room, but everyone's trying to survive. It's just not quite as obvious as years ago when you sort of physically died. And we've got memory encoding, because memories are pretty useful. Okay, so let's talk about the first one. So this is a conference room. Everyone been to one of these types of conferences? Yeah? And you know the room, you see the room. So let's think of what's going on in the room. So if I took a photograph of this room, and it could take a trillion data points or pixels, and that camera could do that, that's the equivalent of one data point in the brain. Yeah, I need one data point in the brain to see this room, where I need a trillion data points in the camera. And that's because we don't see the world as it is, we see the world as we remember. Comfortable with that? Good. Okay, so for example, this room has got some features in it which not everybody's taken notice of. So there's a magazine on the roof just above here, a magazine sort of photograph on the roof just up there, and the camera would capture that, but you don't need to see that. It's not essential for this session for you to see that. There's two layers of cable ducting above on the left, which I thought was pretty unusual. And again, the camera would know that, but you don't know that, so you don't need to know that. And why doesn't the brain see what it needs to see? Anyone? Yeah, it's capacity and the same overload capacity. It's just not essential. And the brain is fuel hungry, so why waste fuel? It's just not needed. And secondly, it's not essential to life, because actually knowing there's a magazine on the roof is not going to change anything. Knowing that there's a lion running towards me is going to change everything. I need to know stuff like that. Yeah. So what does this say? Sorry. Picture. Okay, picture. Okay, what does that say? A vector bar. So if I was in Russia, this would mean restaurant. Almost exactly the same phonetic sounding, restaurant. And that's because in the Russian alphabet, the P letter is actually an R, like row in Greek. C is an S, an O is an all sound, and H is actually an N. So actually, if I was in Russia, it would mean something different. Yeah? And I'm not saying you need to learn Russian, but this is an example. So if I have to work out what that means, and that's essential to life, you need to quickly swap those letters around to work out that means stop. Now anyone that's done maths will know that looks roughly like a pi symbol, so that sort of helps you a little bit to get P. And then you just have to know that a C is an S, and then you can help yourself. So what does that say? Park. Yeah, like a park, a football park. So P at the beginning, an A is an A, we have to replace the R, and K looks like a K. So that's park. So that's pretty useful. And we've learned that took us how long? 30 seconds? Yeah? So if I went to Russia now, where's park on all of this? Yeah, it's top left. So you may not know all of the letters, but you actually sort of find park pretty quickly. And if you go to Greece, or you go to Russia, or you go to Thailand, you start to get to know certain symbols, and you sort of start to get around, because it's useful. And one of the downsides is you can't unremember this. So it's really, once you know stuff, you sort of know it forever, or until it's not useful anymore. So when you come back from Russia, for your holiday, and you settle down and you get busy again, you may forget it. It's just not essential.
Is that forgetting the same as the disconnection, or is that just pipeline facilities deployment?
Yeah, so there's 3 layers of memory encoding. First one's like a cache, an intraday cache, and they've now identified in the brain where that is. So when you feel like your brain's full, if you've had a hard day and you feel like your brain's full, it really is full. Yeah? And then overnight in the sleep cycle, it moves from the cache into short-term memory. And then the next day, provided you repeat and it's useful, you basically slowly move that to long-term memory. And long-term memory is fragmented across the brain, and it takes again around 90 days to move it, which goes back to the comment earlier. So shading. So what colour? Is the top colour different colour from the bottom colour?
It looks dark now.
Yeah? So it's not. So shading's a sort of the perceptual trick in humans as well. Now why is shading useful for humans? Why would we need to know the difference between shades?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a beautiful example. And it originated from our history. So where did humans come from? Right? The savannah. So southern Africa, and then they moved north, Bantu tribe moved north from southern Africa.
So I can tell if something's moving behind the
Late shade, yeah. So shade became part of our DNA. And people that could perceive shade and animals and affect animals moving between parts of savannah basically allowed us to encode shading as a survival mechanism. Faces. So that starts to look like a face, and there was a time in your life where they were dots and blobs and curves. Yeah? But faces exist everywhere. And so we see it in the clouds, we see it in disparate, we see it in toast. So who's ever seen Jesus in toast? Yeah? Sounds a good name for a band. So faces everywhere. Again, they're not real faces, are they? It's just a couple of guys at a table having a drink and a girl next to a waterfall. But you perceive it as a face, and it's useful to do that because we're social creatures. So the girl moving left or right, clockwise or anti-clockwise? We agree? Okay. Okay, it doesn't really matter. Okay, but we perceive motion. Emotion's important. And it goes back a little bit to the shading definition. It enables us to interpret direction, which means we can get out of the way. So if we don't get out of the way, those ancestors have all died off. And we're the product of the ancestors that got it right.
Can I just say, she just started going.
It's weird, isn't it? And there's dominant mental models in social
Sorry,
law.
just on that. Was she going clockwise?
I don't know. So there's dominant mental models in social norms as well. So social norms is the way we behave, the way we think. That's what society tells us. So who's heard the story of Cinderella? Yeah? And in summary, give me a 10-second summary of what Cinderella's story is.
A gorgeous, mistreated, ugly duckling is given an opportunity to go to the ball, and then she meets the Prince Charming. And it's big because the carriage is going to turn into a pumpkin midnight. So
Yeah.
bolt back to the house.
And remember she had rags on at home, she had to clean, the ugly sisters made her clean the floor, so she had rags, and she didn't want to go to the ball in rags like my clothes. I was too hot this morning for a change. So
The fairy godmother
gave us good clothes. Yeah, so, and then what happened at midnight?
It was all going to turn
It's
out.
all going to turn.
Yes, she ran out, didn't she? But she left something, didn't she?
Shoes.
What did she lose? And then the prince got the shoe and found the ugly sisters and made her fit the shoe. That you're the girl I love. She couldn't see her face, obviously. She hasn't got a good memory or facial perception. But anyway, why did the glass slipper survive?
It wasn't. Yeah, it was disconnected.
Well, so was the carriage. That was outside.
Explore that story.
Yeah, so these social norms exist. Here's another one. Carsales.com. I love this company. I sell a Ferrari. I don't have a Ferrari, but if I had one, I could sell it on there for $85, and I can find a buyer for $500,000. You blockchain guys, you'll sort all this out. But essentially, you're connecting a buyer and a seller. That's all they do. And for $85, you get that service. Is that fair? You could list it and advertise it, you can provide information, you get contact details and a couple of safety checks. I pay $85 and we exchange the car for the money. Is that fair? Yeah? So why doesn't it work like that in real estate? So a $500,000 unit, I'm going to sell it. Why does it cost me $11,000?
You've got the intermediary.
Sorry?
You've got the real estate, you've got the intermediary, who obviously wants their car. But it's interesting that you bring it up because I was about to ask a question, well, isn't that a bit like what's happening now where people are going online and doing my house or my sales? So,
Yeah, there's no reason, is there, really? It's just a social norm. And these social norms exist everywhere. They exist in work, they exist in UTS, they exist in this room today, but there's certain ways of thinking. Let's talk about memory. So, who's heard of an SD card? They're almost going out of fashion now, aren't they, in cloud storage? But at the time I wrote this, an SD card stores some information and it's useful. And that's the way the brain works. So remember the P and the R? You've already encoded that, and you've stored it in the brain. Where have you stored it? Short term, yeah.
It's in the cache right now.
Yeah, it's in the cache. Yeah.
That's it tonight.
Yeah. Is it in a place? Is it in like a little dot, a little synaptic dot?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it feels like.
Okay. Well, it's not. Okay. Okay. So it's actually fragmented across the brain already. Yeah. So it's fragmented across the brain in different parts of the brain. So it's a little bit like having a key, like a blockchain key. That has multiple keys, yeah? So you can unlock it in multiple places. Having one blockchain key, if you lose it, you've got a bit of a problem. Am I correct? I'm not an expert. Yeah, so isn't it useful to have lots of keys? So what the brain does, please.
Is this also analogous to how data flows from the internet through fragmented packets?
Well, that's strength vision.
Yeah, yeah.
It's more actually like blockchain because you've got the same information with you.
Oh,
Yeah. So basically what happens in the brain is the quality of memory is a function of the richness of encoding. Yeah? So the more stimuli and senses you use to encode, the more you're going to retrieve the information in the future. So if I give a UTS lecture in the classroom and I give the same UTS lecture in the C, the recall in the C is going to be higher because there's more sensory input at the time. Doesn't matter what the senses are. It can be a cup of coffee, it can be classical music, it can be yellow paper versus blue paper. It doesn't matter what it is, it has to be rich. Yeah.
That something going back to the overload, that's only on more senses that can capture information, which is more vivid, makes it actually done on those points, as opposed to more.
So basically, it's because it's the way the brain stores the information. So they used to think it was stored in a place. Yeah. Remember left brain, right brain? Well, that's not a thing. That doesn't exist. There's no scientific evidence that exists at all. So basically, when you store information, it's basically fragmented across the auditory, visual, and other senses, and a little bit about balance and some survival areas of the brain. But essentially, the reason it crosses all of those is it makes you quicker to recall the information. And why is it important to recall information quickly? For survival. Because if that stripy pussycat-looking thing is over a certain size, I need to know that's a threat to life.
It also sounds like there's different receptors, but different parts of the brain costing the same input as you said of that photo.
Exactly.
So you get like a bit of a smell to
Yeah.
sound.
So I did an experiment, after learning this, I did an experiment with people doing HSC and children struggling with memory. And I said, get them to choose one topic for one colour paper, have one drink type, one music type, and one smell type. And then stick to that religiously through the HSC process. So history is yellow, maths is blue, etc., etc. And I don't know if it worked, but that's why I asked.
That was a great anecdote.
That might have been a big failure.
So the experiment's still going. So fight or flight. So anyone behaved like this before? Spiders, snakes, rats. You know, it's instinct. You can't control this stuff. And you go fight, flight, or fright. Yeah, and it's a bird. It's an amygdala hijack. So the amygdala is a base part of your brain. It's still part of the lizard brain, which is the primal building block for the human brain. And it's good for life because it's really, really short time span. And you can't control it. You can try and influence it, but you can't control it. So if you're in the supermarket and someone pushes your trolley in and you get angry, you can't control that. Yeah, it's automatic. And you'll either fight, because that's good for survival, you'll run away, or you'll freeze. And you see this in car I witnessed a few car accidents in my life, and I watched people and their reactions. You get the people that rush in to help, you get the people that look at their watch and think, oh, I'll be late for work, they keep going. And you get the people that just stand there and do nothing. You know, just they're frozen into inaction, a bit like a rabbit. And that's a survival mechanism for a rabbit. And these amygdala hijacks are important because it gives us a clue around when you ask people to change or force people to change, or you get a little brainstorming workshop. Basically, you're saying, "Please change." And if you say, "Please change," your way of thinking, yeah, which is what this session's about, then it activates part of the brain. If I physically threaten or hit Pip, it's the same part of the brain that gets activated. So when you ask people to change, in a good corporate sense, you know, let's all go and change Amazon, be all customer focused. It's a threat. It's a threat event, and it's perceived as a threat event. So it's hard.
So those like third-year producing things like research labs and triggers, they become really advantage of that, so that I think kind of deeper and more reinforced, just creates this highway that you keep coming down.
Yeah, it can do, provided you've been in the same, if you've had success for a sufficient amount of time, it can. And also, it also tells you a few clues, because we're going to talk about tricking the brain now. And you've got to be careful. So once you know this stuff, you've got to be sensible and cautious about using the information. Because if you over stress the brain, people will shut down again to protect themselves. So the second lesson is the brain functions are sufficiently understood to allow them to be tricked. So this is only 30-year-old science, yeah? So it's a very young industry and a very young science. It's only 30 years old since functional MRI scanning came in. And things will change. But all we know now is things we do know, we can trick the brain. And if we can trick the brain, we can get good results. So we can use about 12 different tricks, and I'll talk about a couple of in this session. So one of the tricks is to compress time. So if you get people to work more quickly, it creates pressure. So we built a mine for Rio Tinto. They have something called blockchain mining, which is a method of mining which is about half the cost of shaft mining. But it's a similar technique. We recreated that in a golf club up in Well, anyway, up there somewhere. And the mine had grade ore in here, and we basically graded it very much similar to the grading of the mine map, the real mine map. But basically created a miniature version. And we also created miniature draw tunnels and collection points. And a big truck collects more ore than a small truck, and a spoon collects less ore than a big spoon, small spoon and a big spoon. We basically gave them spoons, and we gave them processing plants. So we built a processing plant for them. And we asked them to run their mine, yeah, and they get 1 day to do it. And what they have to do is achieve their 3-year strategy in 1 day. So basically they have to hit all of their targets in 1 day. And basically they try and achieve that objective. But we create a stress event, we create an analogous environment for them, and they try and achieve that world. That's a physical version, which is good for 50 people, like something this size. But if you want to do 10,000 people and get them to change, you need to build a sim world, because that's more scalable. So we built a sim world in Unity, and this is a different client, and we built a whole underground mine. And you go in as a sim avatar, and after about 3 minutes, people think they're there. So we watch all of the body language. So all of the men will stand in a circle, and men generally, when they stand in a circle, keep about 60 to 70 centimetres from each other. And girls will stand in a separate circle, and they'll get closer. And that's exactly what happened in the sim. And we spot all of these markers in the sim. We also look at the way they use the controls. So you can turn the avatar to speak to somebody, but there's no point, because you've got your headphones on anyway. So we found people always did that. And also it's possible to walk through Pip to get to Jared, because the Unity sim allows you to do that. But it's not very polite to walk through Pip to get to Jared. So people used to walk around Pip to get to Jared. So there's these funny markers in the mind, but basically their brain gets tricked they're there, and once they're there we can start getting them to do some work. And all we do is we compress time, and we compress time, we put the tile under pressure, we change the sim, and we create interventions that make them panic, and eventually they fail. And what's failure? Right from the beginning? What's failure? Not hitting the goal. Yeah? So they've got a goal, they've got a goal to achieve. So we did this for another client, Goldmine, and these are the day one outcomes graph. So they bubble along for most of the day, not achieving the goal. So the goal's around, they have to hit about, share price of around $2. So they bubble along the first day, not hitting the goal. And then towards the end of the day, there's a slight upturn, and this is the point of failure. This is where the synaptic breakage happens. Yeah? And it's a bit more difficult because we've got 50 brains in the room, but we want them all to break in a similar time. And they start getting a bit of uplift. Now the reason day two starts so strongly, it's not because they're revising, it's because they've got a sleep cycle. So sleep actually does a lot of the work for you. Yeah? So your sleep is probably your most precious resource to innovate and be successful in business and life. So if you can sleep is a really good for you. And sleep is not rest. Yeah? Sleep is for the brain. All the research suggests now sleep is for the brain. There's no other reason for sleep. So this company went from day one 20 cents to 70 cents in the theoretical model, and we made it look like Bloomberg, so you can see their share price rising every 30 minutes. And on the second day it went from 20 cents to $2.50. Now the reason that's important is every sim we do is the same outcome. It's the same graph, day one, day two. Doesn't matter whether it's Swiss Re, Rio Tinto, IBM, Siemens, it doesn't matter who it is, it's always the same picture. And the same picture plays out in the real world. So the real world example for this company was the best performing stock on the ASX in 2016. So their actual share price went to $3.28. In fact, the AFI went down this morning, but they got to $3.28. So they hit the goal. That's all they have to do is hit the goal. So these sims are really good at changing people's way of thinking. So the final lesson is the brain can be tricked into innovating using simulations. Because simulations just trick the brain and we can speed up and we can have interventions in simulations. And they're safe. Provided you don't get that balance right between stressing them and getting them productive, they're fairly safe places to learn. So when I have a fire in a sim mine and I die, I'm not really dying. Yeah? When I have a fire in a real mine, I am really dying. Yeah? But I want the same effect. And the big insight from all of these sims is they can't tell the difference. In learning, you can't tell the difference. So the learning outcome in a sim is the same as the real world. And that's really, really important insight. And that was the main output for the National Science Foundation research. So in summary, the innovation radar just reminds you that innovation is more than a product. You have to fail to innovate because you have to fail to learn. Basic brain functions are now understood. I've got plenty of resources to start to understand the latest research. I'm not saying they're all right, or we do understand it. All I'm saying is there's enough out there to get going, because it's a young science. And finally, if you can understand the brain, you can trick the brain. And you can trick the brain because the brain's an interpolation engine. It just connects the dots with limited information because it's fuel efficient and essential for survival. So, before I go on to Q&A, there's some things you can do to help yourself practically tomorrow. One is to get sleep. Yeah? So if you want to do some intensive work, make sure you have sleep. Also give your brain work to do in sleep. Yeah? So you can actually give your brain tasks to do, and the way to do that is to work intensively in the day and try and pile in the data, and then it will be processed overnight. And in the morning when you're having your shower or your shave, you'll have the answer. And I've used this technique for a few years now. Some of you do it instinctively, but it does work. Another important thing is to believe the importance of failure. So next time you get something wrong, just think, oh, that's really helpful. You may lose your job, but at least you're now learning something. So any final questions? We'll go on to the resources, please.
You mentioned about creating kind of parts or you create a pressure in terms of time to get some outputs. Is it more productive in terms of having stress in the body, say cortisol, or parts of the fight or flight where you actually absorb and create new pathways as opposed to being the back to the point?
It is. See, has anyone been to the Sydney Startup Hub? It's a pretty fun and intensive place, but then the people you see, they're normally there in their waking hours, but some of them are working till 2 and 4 in the morning at home as well. So there's quite a lot of intensity, and this intensity is quite useful until it disrupts sleep, or you get the balance wrong. So another thing that's really important is oxygen and glucose. So it's the one time you should have chocolate and donuts and cakes. If you want to do some really hard thinking or got a particularly hard problem to crack, whether it's coding or a spreadsheet model, get some glucose and get some oxygen. You get oxygen by going for a walk.
What actually hypnosis where you actually do ketones, where it's the quickest source of energy to your brain, like a byproduct of the fat. So it's creating a type of energy. Is that it's going to be sharpest in the barrier?
Yeah, so you sort of know the stuff I've just said, so that's good. And so all the brain needs is glucose, and that's what and it is a lot of it. So 25% of all intake is for the brain. The other thing that's really a good trick is not to have alcohol. If you've got to do really important work like present the next day or code the next day, don't have alcohol. Or have 1 unit or 1 or 2 units to be light. So what alcohol does is it disrupts the REM cycle. So there's 2 types of REM cycles, and basically it disrupts those. So you need about 4 REM cycles a night, and a deep version and a light version, and it disrupts that process, which is why you tend to toss and turn all night long, and you get hot, and you get cold, and it's pretty unpleasant. And basically all of the memory encoding that needs to happen is not working. So it's pretty disastrous, and it's good for students to know that. If they're going into an exam, it's really important not to drink the night before. Not because I'm trying to be purist, get smashed the next night. just be effective that day. Any other final questions?
I have a question. You mentioned maybe just about being comfortable placing the animals if they do suffer mental failure, which they have to make any input.
Okay, so what I posit is I'll create the catastrophic failure in a sim world for you. So the Telstra's best hope is for me to build a sim, get them to fail catastrophically, and then they can recover in the sim, and they'll take that learning into the work, and they'll change Telstra. It would change Telstra. And I'd like to say that for Combank and all of the others, apart from there's no catastrophic event. The Hayden report, which I follow intensely because my company does work in that area, doesn't believe there was a sufficiently big impactful event. What has to happen is someone like Ian Narev, who was the former CEO, has to go to prison. That would be catastrophic and worrying for other CEOs. So that's something that has to happen. I can't think of anything else. They can't be killed or taken out by a sniper. That's another option. It has to be pretty catastrophic for a bank that big to change. And we know they're not changing. It's why neobanks are growing, and people at the bank are joining neobanks. We know what's happening at those big banks. They're finished. It's all over. They're big and strong, so they'll keep going. And they're part of your super fund, so don't kiss them too much. But they're finished. Big businesses like that, really, it's all over.
Is that why there's so much maybe misguided emphasis on clients' interest in trying to create an experience that changes the buying habit of the client or customer? But the past. It's often said in the legal industry that the clients are the reason for change, but a lot
Maybe. Yeah, but maybe there's a little bit of data rationalization going on. You know, the reason the world in law, apparently, I think you or another legal tech firm told me that the law industry is the slowest response to technology out of all industries. After construction. Well, they've had CAD and stuff like that for years, and modularization and things like that. But it's denial, I think. And I work for a law firm now, and they're strange. I'm not a lawyer. I'm a managing consultant, but they're strange people. And they're strange people because they like their desk and they like their paper and they like getting into the detail of a piece of contract law or whatever it is. And you know, things like this and going out and meeting people are not seen as the same thing. So when they leave their desk, they get disrespected. If they're not in front of their screen, they get disrespected. And if I'm in front of my screen, I'm losing. As a consultant, I need to get out, because that's when I'm doing something effective and earning money. If I'm at the desk, I'm not billable and doing nothing. I'm not useful.
Wow, I think the solicitors are back, we should come to the bar.
Okay, well, let's do one more quick question here, and we got to move on.
So,
Two.
you presented this to the Australian investment community. In Silicon Valley, the fact that failure is good is understood, but it's much less understood in Australia.
So I have pitched in Silicon Valley, and I did a startup at IPO'd, and I sort of understand what's going on now. So I think Silicon Valley is successful as an ecosystem because there's so much failure. Yeah. So the stuff that I'm trying to build into Sims to force failure, we don't need, because they're doing it already. And all those guys that put their hand up at the beginning have worked for less than 3 years. You've already got a great advantage over other people. So this happens naturally. I don't know, you don't really understand neuroscience or to build Sims, because startups fail. So every time you see Uber and PayPal, at my time they had eBay and PayPal on the front end. When I went to Charles River, those on the thing, I thought, oh, but you funded those guys, that was a good decision. And but there's at least another 100 that failed. Yeah, and these cycles of failure you get in startups, and it's really healthy. So it's the most healthy model that exists, I think, in commerce. To have these rapid, and if you are steady state for 2 or 3 years, you should force failure.
So I'm going to jump in right now. Sorry about that. We can do more questions at lunch. I am going to allow one more, just because you're up next anyways. I'm cutting into your time now. So go ahead, Mark, while I get your presentation set up.
All right. My question was about innovating and the requirement for other people with different ideas to be involved. I know your topic was really around inside your own.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering whether we've kind of seen observations about, because in my own experience, getting together with people who are not thinking the same way as me helps me think in a different way. So the whole time thinking ideas, you kind of bump up against people who are different. That drives a different way of thinking in the culture.
Yeah. So what happens is I have a fixed mental model and a construct, and the way that plays out in real life is I have dominant cultures of practice. So the way I behave, the way I work in life. When somebody else comes along, they have a different mental model, clearly. And what tends to happen is we try to beat them into having the same cultures and practice. So in the early days of people join companies, you get lots of benefit from these people. So if you have diversity approaches, and this is not males and females, this is just different brains, and different ways of thinking, it's really healthy. What's not healthy is trying to get them dumbed down that goodness by adopting the Telstra way. So all my brilliant startup friends that joined Telstra, and I don't have a really bad thing against Telstra, but the people that joined Telstra all got dumbed down to the Telstra way, and now all of the goodness that was in the economic value of the acquisition has gone. Because basically you've ruined that company. Yeah? So it's really important. So it's actually better not to acquire the company, but to acquire an interest. That would be a better model, which is a little bit what Neuroscience tried to do. But it's hard. But it moved. But essentially, you're right. more brains create cognitive bias cancellation, which basically gets to a better place more quickly.
Good luck.
This is your work.